Okay, to match 5 of my recent league that I played. We're currently 4-0. We're heading into a potential 5-0 here. I'm very much hoping for a 5-0 as I got one the previous day, and it'd be really nice to go back-to-back 5-0s, but we're going to have to work hard for it. So, unfortunately, our first matchmaking didn't work. We move on to the second, and we go and lose the die roll. And our hand here is okay, so we'll keep. An opponent leads on Deathrite, which isn't the end of the world, but probably not what we want to see at the moment, especially not with a Cabal Ritual off the top. We actually lead on a C here into a Ponder. We do that mostly to disguise what we're on a little bit, as Tropical Preordain, well, probably a better play, is much more likely to tip him off that we're on Storm, whereas at least C into Ponder is a bit more open that we might be on Delver. We see a decent Ponder there. We're going to draw the tutor next turn. Ideally, we want to draw like a Brainstorm and a Fetch here and get rid of the Trop completely. We don't really want to tip him off that we have access to green before we're post board, but we're happy to play out the Trop if we need to. Opponent finds a second land, and looks like he's going to cast a Strix, and instead he dumps a Leovold on us, which kind of makes a bit of a mess of the rest of our hand. I'm glad we got the tutor, but we're probably going to be struggling a little bit from here, and we need to preordain. Even if we're not going to draw the card, we need to preordain to get rid of the Ponder on top of our library, and take the LED next turn. So yeah, we're looking a bit rough here, unfortunately. Not a huge amount we can do about it, but opponent will Ponder, probably just looking for extra interaction by now. They're going to know we're on Storm. Play out a second Deathrite, so we're probably in a lot of trouble here. That's a pretty fast clock on us. 7 damage a turn, putting us on around a 3-turn clock, probably a little more, as they'll probably find other threats. We're going to Ponder, and basically we just want to make sure that we're drawing a Dark Ritual next turn would be good for us. And we want to contemplate firing off a Duress here. And we'll see a hand that's just shit. Strix is going to draw them into a new card, which I guess means I get to see 2 new cards for next turn, but they're not looking great in terms of interaction. The problem is we're in a lot of trouble here. And we draw a Brainstorm. Last thing we want to see. So we kind of almost need to fire off the Duress here, but we can't afford to. So what we're going to do is, I believe we're going to Cabal Ritual. Play out the LED, and I only have a single out from here, so I grab an Ad Nauseam. This is a very risky Ad Nauseam, but it's currently our only out. It's what we should have done last turn. Now, unfortunately, when I did this when I played the other day, I make a mistake here. So if you notice, we haven't made a land drop for turn. So we've ripped a tutor, and we're now down to 7. Now we can't afford to go down to below 5, but we're actually, if we stopped at that last Lotus Petal there, or sorry, if we stopped at that LED there, we actually win the game, because we go Petal, Petal, LED, Swamp, drop the tutor, and that gives us exactly Storm Count 9, which would have got us there. Unfortunately, I missed the line. Drew a Cabal Ritual instead of a Dark Ritual. I thought I needed a Dark Ritual. So in terms of sideboarding, we want to bring in Empty, and we want a couple of Decays. We'll drop a Therapy. I think it's worth dropping a Therapy here. It's instead of the Preordain, and I think the Xanted Swarm was wrong, just because of Baleful Strix. It doesn't really hold up against Baleful Strix. We don't know if, yeah, the Swarm was wrong. We messed up the Ad Nauseam, so we're making a bunch of mistakes here. We can afford to drop a Cabal Therapy in this matchup, I think, counterintuitively, just because we bug decks don't tend to have as much interaction as, say, like the really heavy blue-white decks, or at least in my experience. So we would have been able to afford to go down on discard for more hate artifacts. Now that hand there is something we can make a shambles of. So we can force them. We can basically make sure we're going to take 2 blue cards out of their hand, and they have their choice as to whether or not that's going to be Force of Will or Brainstorm, and they're probably going to want to keep the Brainstorm here. So we're just going to fire off that Therapy straight away, and just try to make a little bit of a mess of them here. And they're not going to force us. Obviously, I think correctly, they are rating the Brainstorm higher, and we've kind of left them with not really very much in hand. And I think this turn we're going to want to, we'll play out the Xanted Swarm, just to turn off every other bit of interaction they have. Well, obviously accept the Marsh Casualties, but it's not too bad to get the Marsh Casualties out of their hand, mostly because it just means that Empty the Warrens, which is a legitimate option at the moment here, is much more open. Obviously, K Command is still a card here, so that's really what we should have been thinking about, but that's okay. We'll let the Brainstorm try to find their out. Okay, and we get Hymned, which is pretty rough here. So I think we kind of just want to, I feel like we probably should be passing the turn here. Yep, okay, fantastic. Okay. We don't actually know that the Pyroblast and the Misty are in hand, but he doesn't have red, so we're not too stressed about it. And we Brainstorm actually into a straight up kill. So if we chuck back the Duress and the Brainstorm, we can Ritual out to 6 mana, play the Petal for red. We can Tutor for Past in Flames, and actually just get him that way. We can also add Nauseam, which leaves us with a land drop open. But I think from here, we're kind of happy to just chance a Past in Flames kill. He would have had to get pretty lucky. He's basically the only things that would have ruined us there is something like if he'd managed to find another Force plus blue card, or if he'd found a Surgical, that would also would have killed us. Or obviously Fluster as well, but I think, you know, he's down to only a handful of outs at that point, so. Now it looks like I contemplated cutting Swarm. And we're on the draw with a hand that does exactly nothing. It's got a couple of discard spells, but that's it. This is a much better hand. And we'll take the Probe. And we're going to Probe here and see a hand that I think it will have, yeah, there we go. So it's got a Hymn to Turak, Fluster, Masked Casualty, Surgical. We're going to want to try to take the... We're going to try to Duress him, and we're going to take either him or Fluster. We're going to, like, our hope here is that he doesn't Fluster us. And he lets us take the him because we're just one for wanting him, but he's not going to. Obviously the him nets him a card, so he's happy to Fluster the Duress. So it's possible we should have Brainstormed to protect the Infernal Tutor in our next turn. But yeah, I'm a bit unsure about that. I'm unsure which was the correct play there. I feel like trying to take the him wasn't the worst plan we could have had, but just trying to make sure that maybe we keep our tutor safe and don't get it surgicaled may have been better. He's going to go after the Dark Ritual now. This seems fine. We don't have any other rituals in hand, so we're not losing any cards. And we're going to want to Brainstorm here and find a fetch, because that Swarm is just going to rot in hand otherwise. We need to get rid of the bad lands too, as that's not doing anything. And unfortunately, we now need to burn a Ponder just to shuffle. And even worse, we see an LED, which we kind of want, but we kind of can't afford to keep at the moment. And draw into the last thing we want, which is more land. And of course we get himmed again, just to make sure that we're never in the game. It's possible that maybe we should have brought in Flusterstorms. I've never overly liked them against fair decks, even if it does occasionally deal with a him. But I think it's not necessarily the worst thing we could have done. Preventing even one him just would have been pretty good for us here. Okay, and we see a hand that's pretty much making sure we're not going anywhere at the moment. And unfortunately just draw into pretty dead removal. And Snapcaster on Surgical. I guess taking probably no, Infernal Tutor. Okay, I forgot that was still in the graveyard there. So we're kind of looking a bit worse here. We now need to get down to something like a fairly large natural empty, or to find our Dark Petition, and neither of those are looking particularly good at the moment. So we'll just fire off another probe here. There's no point in holding on. We just want to kind of, I guess, cycle it just to see if we can find something else to give us a bit more gas. And unfortunately we see another land, and he's drawn another Snapcaster. So I think he's going to snap Brainstorm, essentially drawing him another card and making our clock a bit quicker. And we consider decaying a snap for a moment. It's shortened. It gives us a 5-turn clock instead of a 3-turn clock. So maybe that would have been the correct call. Anything that would have bought us a bit more time might have got us there, but too late. And I think we're going to fire off a Therapy, take their Force. The Force is the most likely card. It's not necessarily known by now, but it's pretty likely. They're not going to want to dump that. And unfortunately, we now only have one more turn to draw out of this. So I'm also pretty sure that the only card that could potentially get us out of this is actually Brainstorm. And we can't actually get a Brainstorm off at the moment, thanks to the Red Blast currently sitting there in hand. So I'm pretty sure no matter what happens here, we actually lose. There you go, Dark Petition. So we realistically, we lost here due to